with us about what our Republican colleagues suggest that they're saving the taxpayers of California, figure of about $1.2 million an hour. And I think that figure certainly pales in comparison by my mathematical judgment to the figure that Mr. Kempton gave us yesterday about the additional costs for the infrastructure projects alone if we have to stop and restart them. That figure was about $392 million. So nothing is completely independent here in this huge budget equation. I've heard, you've heard me speak over the last couple of days about not just trying to tackle the budget challenges that we certainly have from a live within our means standpoint. I've tried to contextualize it with a quality of life argument. But either way you cut it, we can't have a do we raise taxes or not conversation independent and unrelated to are we cutting into the very programs and services that Californians want. For every person who calls any of us, Democrats or Republican, that says, don't cut my taxes, I don't believe that that same caller is continuing with, but go ahead and cut my child's school funding, or but go ahead and cut the funding to our local hospital that I may have to go to in the event of an emergency. It's all interrelated. And I think the conversation about whether or not to raise taxes and what that would mean to what people pay, what businesses pay, that too is interrelated to whether or not people continue to have jobs. Because the same revenue that comes to the state via taxes is what we're suggesting be reinvested in the state in public works projects, that we reinvest in the state and the people of the state and their wages via this budget package. And because they are not independent of one another, I'd suggest that for every tax that we don't do as part of this comprehensive package, there is a job loss consequence. That is the picture that we've tried to paint. That is the equation that we've tried to put together over the course of the last 24 hours. And whether it's a tax that goes up or doesn't go up, if the wrong decision there leads to unemployment, I'd suggest that the unemployment is the ultimate tax. The job loss is the ultimate price to pay for that impacted Californian, and frankly for all of us. Because when somebody loses their job as a result of our inaction on this budget, not only is that individual out of a job, they in turn are no longer going to be paying the taxes that come with earning salary in this state. And in addition to that, that individual will also be coming to the state, whether it's for unemployment, whether it's for health care, whether it's for something else, and provide the state with additional costs. Lastly, I want to share information on behalf of PORAC, an organization that we all know, both sides of the aisle, the Peace Officers Research Association of California, who often chime in with specifically a public safety point of view. And they have a letter that I believe they've distributed to everybody, and I won't read it all, but I will take a couple of pieces from it. And I'll quote that on their behalf, although this budget is not perfect for anyone, this compromise does protect basic public safety services at a time when law enforcement agencies and the citizens we serve need it most. PORAC supports this compromise because it provides a more stable revenue source for your local law enforcement going forward, and it protects the critical public safety programs in your community. The compromise agreement protects baseline funding for critical programs such as COPS, juvenile justice, rural sheriffs, CalMet, booking fee reimbursement, and other key public safety initiatives that have a positive impact in your communities. Colleagues, let me speak for a second from the perspective of my own district and the communities that I grew up in. Communities that, in addition to all the challenges we all share about trying to improve the performance of public schools and expand access to health care for our constituents and invest in the transportation and other infrastructure that we need, like a few other communities throughout the state, has had over the years tremendous challenges when it comes to public safety, and specifically tremendous challenges as it pertains to gang violence and youth violence. I grew up in a community called Pacoima, and it's still present there. I represent communities like North Hills, Canoga Park, and others, where we're still working day in, day out, trying to realize a safer community for the people who live there. It was not quite 10 years ago that the gentleman I was proud to work for served in the assembly at the time, Tony Cardenas. Some of you served with him. He partnered with a former senator, a former member of this House, Adam Schiff, and together they created the Schiff-Cardenas Cops Juvenile Justice Funding Program. This budget not only protects those programs, this budget actually helps secure ongoing funding for those important programs that we know program participants can vouch for, community activists can vouch for, law enforcement officials, the men and women that wear the badge to work, can vouch for. And how are we doing that? Are we just suggesting that these programs are sacred cows in our overall budget and we're not going to touch them? No. My understanding is there's actually bipartisan support for a new funding mechanism for this program. I know one of the elements of the overall budget package that a lot of our Republican colleagues don't like is not the complete restoration, but the partial restoration of the vehicle license fee, back up to 1%. In addition to that, we have this 0.15% increase that will be dedicated to these programs I just spoke of. And it's one example, maybe just one example today, but a concrete example of where people from both sides of the aisle can come to an agreement that this is a priority, and we're going to be willing to catch your breath here, raise a fee or raise a tax, raise revenues in order to provide that for the people of California, because it has become a collective priority. It makes sense. And I suggest to you that the other elements of this budget package, the other revenue increases, the other spending priorities, follow the same logic, whether it's education, whether it's healthcare, or whether it's the incentives to certain industries that we're declaring as important, like film production in the state of California, like housing and others. It's pretty simple. And I think overall, this budget package is fair, is balanced. Yes, it maybe raises revenues in a way that's a little bit at a level uncomfortable for some, but guess what? It's also making cuts in numerous areas that are uncomfortable for many. That's what's called a compromise. It's been a compromise budget negotiated by both Democrats and Republicans, the governor, members of both houses. We've heard this. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. I urge your aye vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Padilla. Senator Alquist is recognized at her desk.
Thank you. Very briefly. Thank you, Mr. President. You know, I did major in mathematics, and I did teach algebra, and I did teach trigonometry. And